Frank Gaffney joins me now, who's the creator, founder, and president of the Center for Security Policy. Frank, this has been a news day that I've been in the news business 43 years. There are not many days in August that are as crazy as today has been with some of the developments. And now you're about to bring us another one involving why our Iran sanctions have not been working as well as they might be. Welcome back to the program, by the way.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Lars. Thank you. Yeah, the challenge is that we've got, of course, allies, or so-called allies at least, who are actively seeking to undermine President Trump's reimposed sanctions with Iran inexplicably. They seem to think that if they can simply prop up this despotic and increasingly dangerous regime, that they'll make money, but they'll also be safe. And I don't think either is true. But in addition to that, Lars, we have a problem with the man who has been entrusted, I'm sorry to say, by my friend Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, with the job of running something called the Iran Action Group. And the Iranians have denounced this thing as an effort to effect regime change in Iran, and I'd like to think that's what its purpose is. But one thing we know about Brian Hook, the man that has been tapped for this job, is he's not the least bit interested in that, as best I can tell. He seems to be rather like the Europeans, in fact, has been working with the Europeans to first perpetuate the agreement to try to prevent Donald Trump from walking away with it, walking away from it, I should say. Unfortunately, that didn't work. But since the president walked away from it, Brian Hook has been leading the effort to try to essentially find some way to salvage this terrible deal. And on top of all of that, you'd think he would have been made ineligible for such a sensitive position as running this Iran Action Group, this high-profile effort sponsored by the Secretary of State, because he was one of those fellas in the Washington swamp who were very much opposed to Donald Trump becoming president of the United States. He didn't actually sign the so-called Never Trumper letter, Lars, but he put together the organization that sponsored it and made no secret of his loathing for Donald Trump. And it's inexplicable that this guy's got any kind of job in the administration at all, let alone one so important.
Frank, here's the thing I don't understand about this. I understand that government works a bit differently than the private sector. But even at my level, I have people who work for me. I have people I work with. When I hire somebody to do a job, before the final hire is made, you say, now, I need you to understand what it is I need you to do, and then I need you to tell me that you can actually do that. And, sometimes that's unsuccessful. The person will find themselves 6 months in and say, look, this is just not for me, and they leave. Or I can say to them, you're not getting the job done that I need you to do. And on rare occasions, I've had to let someone go. When Mike Pompeo picked somebody, especially for an important task like this, wouldn't you think he'd have had that same kind of generic conversation? Here's what we need done. Can you do that? And then if he sees the man or woman not doing that job, have 4 or 5 conversations with him saying, you're not doing the things I need, and if you don't start doing them, we're going to send you off to the unemployment line. Does that not happen in the federal government?
Well, I think it's probably a case-by-case answer, Lars. For some individuals, I'm pretty sure that does happen, and very forthrightly. But I think one of the frustrations that I've certainly had with this administration, and I'm an admirer overall of the president and the people he has around him now, by and large, and the policies that he's pursuing. But there has been a tendency, ever since he became president, to accommodate what I call insubordinate subordinates. We finally saw H.R. McMaster, the former National Security Advisor, and Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State, put out to pasture, but it took a long time for that to take place, and a lot of damage was done, I think, in the interval. And I think in the case of Brian Hook, I can't say whether one of those gentlemen's successors, Mike Pence at the Secretary of State job, had this kind of conversation with Brian Hook. I have the feeling that he feels he knows Brian and that he's worked with him now for some months, and maybe had some dealings with him when he was the CIA director before he moved over to the State Department. But all I can tell you is I don't think whatever that conversation was or whatever answers Brian Hook may have given to such questions, if they were posed, is going to contradict an unhappy reality, which is this guy is not on the president's team.
I just
would
think
in
that,
the same direction he is.
That when that becomes clear, that Mike Pompeo would have a conversation or two and say, "You're not getting it done. Either get it done or get out, and I'll replace you with somebody else." Unless Pompeo thinks he's doing the right thing, right?
Yeah, that's another possibility. I hope that's not the case. But one thing I will say is, you asked about government, and I can tell you from 40 years of being in and observing it closely, one thing that does operate is if you start taking personnel actions, you're likely to get bad press in this town. Yeah. And that's something that I think Mike Pompeo has been very cagey about doing.
Hey, I got to tell you something, Frank. I would never spring a surprise on you unless circumstances just give it to me. Literally 2 minutes ago, this just crossed. And you and I both know the man. You know him better. But the DOJ just sent out a press release that said Representative Duncan Hunter and his wife have been indicted on campaign finance crimes. Had you heard that?
No.
Oh my God! Because he's a House Armed Services. He's a significant figure. And oh my God,
he's a good man. He
is.
Man, and I've worked with him most recently in connection with concerns that we both have had about some port facilities that the U.S. government inexplicably has been turning over to the family of Saddam Hussein's bomb maker.
You and I have talked about that.
We need him there. Yes, we.
I know we do, and this is.
Sorry to hear this.
I just wonder what's going on. And for the life of me, I do not understand what's going on in the Department of Justice under Jeff Sessions. And I had such high hopes for him. Not just high hopes. I was nearly certain he was going to be a fantastic attorney general, and I do not understand at all what's going on there. By the way, one last thing: withdrawing from the INF and the New START treaties. Why should we get out of those?
Well, I'm a big believer that if the other party appears or is not being bound by these accords, we shouldn't be. And in the case of INF, the Russians have already been formally found, even by the Obama administration, to be in violation of that accord. And it sure looks like they're setting up to do the same with respect to New START. So I think we desperately need to modernize our nuclear deterrent forces, and we should do so without the constraints of those treaties on us either.
Well, I agree with you there. I mean, and if the Russians are not living up to the agreement, I think President Trump should do the same kind of thing he did with the North Koreans. If they start making noises and you say we're not going to put up with that, then you say the meeting's off or the deal is off. And it communicates something important and powerful. I'm sorry to drop that on you, but Frank, literally that popped up while the two of us were talking, and I looked at that and I thought, holy cow, what's going on? The allegation, just so people understand, and I've just now seen it literally from the DOJ, is that $250,000 was diverted from campaign monies and spent on personal items instead of in nothing salacious, but just regular living expenses. And we'll want to find out the details behind that. Frank Gaffney is the founder and the president of the Center for Security Policy.